Hello, everyone. I am a storyteller, and I am here to offer my support today. I understand that you are likely using this video to help you drift off to sleep. Before we begin, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I would also be interested to know where you are located and what time it is for you. Now, please get comfortable and take a moment to relax. Felts Mills, New York, was a quiet town, nestled between endless forests and the Black River. It was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. At least, that's what outsiders believed. But the locals whispered about the old mill, a crumbling structure that had stood for over a century, abandoned and rotting. No one dared to go near it after dark. In the fall of 1997, a teenager named Ethan Graves decided to prove the stories wrong. He and his two friends, Mark and Lisa, sneaked into the mill one chilly October night. With only flashlights and an old camcorder, they laughed off the town's warnings. But the laughter didn't last long. Inside, the air was thick and stale, carrying a faint metallic scent. The wooden floor creaked beneath their feet as they explored. Lisa gasped when she found old newspapers scattered in a forgotten office. The headlines were chilling. Family of 4 disappears. Last seen near Felts Mills. Missing children, strange sightings reported. Ethan scoffed. Urban legends, he muttered. But then Mark pointed at something. Footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. They weren't alone. A sudden creak echoed from above. The group turned their flashlights to the second floor, their breath visible in the freezing air. Then the whispers began. Not loud, not clear, just a soft, eerie murmuring, like voices carried on the wind. The sound wrapped around them, growing louder, more urgent. Lisa clutched Ethan's arm. "Let's go," she whispered. But Ethan was already moving toward the stairs. He reached the second floor, camcorder rolling. The room was filled with broken furniture and rusted machinery. And in the center stood a single rocking chair, swaying slightly as if someone had just left it. A soft giggle echoed behind them. They turned. A shadow moved, a figure standing just out of reach of their flashlights. Lisa screamed. The camcorder hit the floor, its lens cracked but still recording, as something lunged from the darkness. Mark and Lisa ran. They didn't stop until they reached the town, breathless and shaking. When they returned the next morning with the police, the mill was silent. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no Ethan. All they found was his camcorder, sitting in the middle of the floor. The last recording was just a few seconds of static until the screen flickered. For a brief moment, Ethan's face appeared, his mouth open in a silent scream. Behind him, a pair of hands reached from the darkness. The screen went black. Ethan was never seen again. But sometimes, late at night, if you stand near the ruins of the old mill, you can still hear the whispers. Years passed, but Ethan Graves' disappearance remained an unsolved mystery. His parents moved away, the police closed the case, and the town of Felts Mills tried to forget. But not everyone did. Lisa Carter never stopped having nightmares. The whispers followed her. Shadows moved in her bedroom when the lights were off. And every year on October 13th, her phone would ring at exactly 3:12 a.m. But no one was ever on the other end. Finally, after 10 years, she decided to go back. Lisa wasn't going alone. She convinced a documentary filmmaker, James Holloway, and his team to investigate the old mill. Armed with night vision cameras, thermal scanners, and digital recorders, they set up their equipment inside the rotting structure. The air was colder than it should have been. The building creaked, though there was no wind. The moment they stepped inside, Lisa whispered, It knows we're here. Hours passed with nothing unusual until midnight. That's when the camcorder from 1997 turned on by itself. It shouldn't have been possible. The battery was long dead. The tape inside was blank, except for one new recording, a single frame. Ethan. He looked older, but barely. His skin was pale, his eyes hollow. His lips moved as if whispering something, but no sound came through. Lisa covered her mouth in horror. "He's still here," she whispered. Then the rocking chair in the corner started moving. The whispers returned, louder this time. The words were still impossible to understand, but their intent was clear. "Leave." The thermal scanner detected movement. Something unseen was standing right next to Lisa. James grabbed her arm. "We have to go." Now they ran. But as they reached the door, the whispers turned into a scream, a deep, gut-wrenching wail that shook the entire mill. The wooden beams cracked, the floor buckled, and then silence. The team made it out just as the structure collapsed behind them. Dust and debris filled the air, but nothing, no one came out of the wreckage. Back at their studio, James reviewed the footage. Every camera caught the same thing. Nothing. No shadows, no whispers, no Ethan. But then Lisa's phone rang, 3:12 a.m. She didn't answer. James picked up the call instead. For a moment, it was just static. Then a voice, barely a whisper, came through. "Help me." The line went dead. Lisa left town the next day and never returned. The mill is gone now, buried under rubble. But if you go there on a cold October night, some say you can still hear a voice calling from beneath the earth. A whisper that sounds just like Ethan Graves. Lisa Carter never spoke about that night again. She moved across the country, changed her number, and tried to forget. But the past doesn't let go so easily. 15 years after Ethan's disappearance, a new family moved to Felts Mills. The Bennett family, a couple and their 10-year-old son Noah, had no idea about the town's dark history. They bought a house built near the ruins of the old mill, excited for a fresh start. But Noah was the first to notice something was wrong. It started small, soft scratches behind the walls, faint tapping at his window at night. His parents blamed tree branches, mice, anything logical. Then came the voices. Late at night, Noah would hear someone whispering just outside his door. At first, he thought it was his parents, but when he asked them, they insisted they never left their room. One night, he finally listened closely. The whispers weren't just random noise. They were saying something. "Noah, come play. It's so cold, so dark. Help me." The voice sounded young, familiar, like a boy his age. One evening, Noah's mother, Sarah Bennett, was brushing her teeth when the bathroom light flickered. The mirror fogged over, even though the room wasn't hot. And then, a handprint appeared on the glass, small, like a child's. She backed away, heart pounding. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. A figure stood behind her in the reflection. But when she spun around, nothing was there. The next morning, Noah told his parents he had made a new friend. "A boy named Ethan," he said. His parents exchanged nervous glances. "Where did you meet him?" "In my room. He talks to me at night." Sarah's stomach twisted. "What does he say?" "He says he's trapped. He wants me to help him." That night, Sarah and her husband, Daniel, stayed awake. At exactly 3:12 a.m., Noah's door creaked open by itself. A wave of cold air rushed through the house. Then they heard it, the whispers. Sarah grabbed her phone and started recording. "Who's there?" she whispered. A soft giggle came from Noah's room. Then his bed slid across the floor on its own. Noah sat up, his eyes glazed over, staring at the dark corner of the room. "He's here," he whispered. "Ethan's here." Sarah lunged forward, grabbing Noah. Daniel flipped on the light, but the shadows didn't disappear. Instead, they moved. The temperature dropped so low their breath turned to fog. The whispers turned into frantic pleading. Then Noah gasped, "He says they're coming!" A loud bang shook the house. The windows shattered. Every light burned out at once. And in the final moment before everything went black, Sarah saw it. A figure standing in the doorway. It was a boy. His face pale, his eyes hollow, his mouth moving in silent desperation. It was Ethan Graves. The Bennetts fled that night. They never returned. A week later, the house was found abandoned. Every door and window wide open. Inside, the only sign of what had happened was a message scratched into the wooden floor of Noah's room. 3 words. "I am here." Phelps Mills remains quiet, just as it always has. But those who live nearby say that if you stand near the old mill's ruins on a cold October night, you might hear a child whispering, begging for someone to listen. After the Bennetts fled, the house near the Phelps Mills mill ruins stood abandoned. No one dared to buy it. No one dared to enter, until paranormal investigator Adam Pierce arrived. Adam had spent years documenting haunted locations. He had heard the rumors about Ethan Graves, the whispers, the disappearances, and he wanted proof. He set up his equipment, night vision cameras, EMF detectors, and digital recorders. Alone in the house, he hit record and waited. At 3:12 a.m., the room turned ice cold. The EMF detector spiked to red. The voice recorder, silent until now, suddenly hissed with static. Then, just for a moment, a voice broke through. A boy's voice. "Leave! Before they find you!" Adam's heart pounded. "Who's they?" he whispered. Silence. Then a deep, guttural growl echoed from the hallway. Not a child's voice. Something else. The shadows moved. Adam turned toward the hallway. His night vision camera flickered, then died. But his eyes adjusted just in time to see it. The shadows in the corner of the room weren't just darkness. They were moving. A tall, thin figure crawled along the ceiling, its limbs too long, its fingers dragging across the walls. It didn't have eyes, only empty sockets that seemed to stare right at him. And behind it stood Ethan Graves, pale, frozen, his lips stitched shut. Adam bolted for the door, but something slammed it shut. His recorder caught one last whisper before everything went silent. "You shouldn't have come." His footage was never recovered. Only the audio remained, filled with static, distant whispers, and, at the very end, the sound of a child laughing. Days later, authorities found Adam's equipment abandoned inside the house. His car was still parked outside, but Adam himself was gone. Another name added to Phelps Mills' list of missing persons. The house has since been demolished, but those who live nearby say that sometimes, on cold, quiet nights, you can still hear the whispers, and if you listen too closely, you might never leave. Phelps Mills had tried to forget. The mill was gone, the house was demolished, and the town did its best to erase the past. But some things can't be buried. A new development project was announced. Plans to build on the land where the mill and the house once stood. The construction crew laughed off the ghost stories. They said it was just superstition, until the digging began. On the 3rd day of excavation, workers uncovered something strange. A door buried underground. It was made of old rotting wood, sealed shut with thick iron chains. The workers assumed it was some kind of forgotten storm cellar. One of them, Charlie Reynolds, decided to pry it open. Big mistake. The moment the chains hit the ground, a rush of freezing air escaped from below. The equipment malfunctioned. The air smelled like damp earth and something else. Something rotten. Charlie peered inside with a flashlight. The tunnel was narrow, leading into pitch-black nothingness. The walls were covered in scratches, as if something had tried to claw its way out. And then, the whispers began. At first it was faint, just a soft murmuring, too many voices at once. Then a single voice rose above the others. "Let me out." Charlie stumbled backward. His flashlight flickered, and for half a second he saw something inside the tunnel, a pale hand reaching for him. That was enough. The construction crew filled the hole the next day. The project was canceled, but it was too late. Something had been disturbed. Something had been waiting. Weeks later, a night guard patrolling the site saw a figure standing at the edge of the lot. A boy. He looked no older than 12, wearing torn, dirt-covered clothes. The guard called out, "Hey kid, you okay?" The boy lifted his head. His mouth slowly opened, but no sound came out. Instead, from the darkness behind him, the whispers returned, louder, closer. The lights exploded. The guard ran. By the time backup arrived, the lot was empty. But on the ground, near where the boy had stood, they found something impossible, a rusted camcorder. Inside was a single tape. The footage, Ethan Graves, staring into the camera, mouthing 3 silent words. "It's not over." The construction site remains untouched. No one dares to build there. But if you ever visit the ruins late at night and you listen closely, you might still hear the whispers. And if they call your name, run. Felts Mills had become a ghost town, not in the literal sense, but in the way people avoided certain places, spoke in hushed tones, and refused to stay out after dark. The abandoned construction site where the buried tunnel was discovered remained untouched. No one dared to go near it. No new buildings were erected. It was as if the land itself had been cursed, but not everyone stayed away. On October 13th, exactly 30 years after Ethan Graves disappeared, an internet personality named Dylan Rook decided to do what no one else would. He wanted to live stream a night at the site. Armed with high-tech cameras, a thermal scanner, and his phone, he announced to his thousands of followers, "If there's anything out here, we're going to see it live." His viewers were thrilled. The chat flooded with excited messages as he stepped onto the forbidden land at exactly 3:12 a.m. At first, nothing happened. The wind blew through the trees, his equipment beeped occasionally, and the chat filled with taunts. "Fake. Nothing's gonna happen, bro. Just another ghost hunter scam." Then his mic picked up something. Not the wind, not static, a whisper. "Dylan, run." The chat exploded. "Who said that? Dude, did you hear that? It said your name." Dylan froze. "That wasn't me," he muttered, scanning the darkness with his camera. Then his thermal scanner went wild. A figure just beyond his flashlight's reach. Small, child-sized. The chat lost it. "There's someone behind you. OMG, zoom in." "Is that a kid?" Dylan turned slowly, and that's when his camera caught it. A boy, standing just beyond the ruined construction site, his face pale, his mouth sewn shut. The whispers grew louder. The screen glitched. The camera feed became distorted as Dylan started screaming. Then, blackout. The stream abruptly ended. His followers panicked, spamming his social media, trying to reach him, but Dylan was never heard from again. Days later, the police found his equipment. His phone, still recording, had one final frame captured on its screen, a shadowy hand reaching from the darkness, and scrawled in the dirt where he last stood were 2 words, "Still here." After Dylan's disappearance, the town of Felts Mills did something drastic. They put up fences around the construction site, blocked all roads leading in. The town was practically erased from maps. No one speaks about what happened. No one dares to investigate, but the whispers remain. And if you're ever foolish enough to search for Felt's Mills on a cold October night, you might find something strange. A live stream notification from Dylan Rook's account, even though he's been gone for years. And if you click on it, you'll hear a voice whispering, "You're next."